StossDrunk. StossDrunk. It's almost October for libertarians, and you know what that means. Halloween is on the horizon. In honor of that, I figured we should take a look at something scary today. No, I don't mean Keynesian economics. I mean a scary video game. And what could be scarier than Resident Evil? This nightmarish survival horror series started off in 1996 and has continued onwards through sequels and spin-offs for over 25 years. After a number of people thought the franchise went off the rails in 2012 with Resident Evil 6, things went quiet for a bit. But then, in 2017, game developer Capcom decided to do the equivalent of an interest rate hike to slow things down and bring the series back to its roots. The end result was Resident Evil VII Biohazard. A lot of people had good things to say about this game when it came out, and it's still praised today. But is it libertarian? Resident Evil 7 is a simple enough story to start off. You play as a man named Ethan who receives a video from his missing wife, Mia. Mia up and vanished 3 years ago faster than a 1980s freely elected South American government leader. So when Ethan gets a message from her out of the blue, clearly he's a bit concerned. He takes off and winds up in a rundown home somewhere in the heart of Louisiana. Once there, he encounters the Bakers, a family so redneck that they make a rerun of Duck Dynasty look like an episode of Frasier. From there, you have to escape from them and fight off a bunch of mold creatures, keep tabs on your health, manage your inventory, and not die. As you can probably tell, one of the big changes here is that you play the game from a first-person perspective, a first for a non-spin-off title in the Resident Evil franchise. Admittedly, this does ratchet up the tension quite a bit. Personally, I found the game scary enough that it gave me anxiety, which is unusual for me outside that time where I was investigated for insider trading. You sell off 80,000 shares in Enron and suddenly everyone starts looking at you funny. Anyway, things have changed a lot from the overly action-focused Resident Evil 6. Fortunately, guns and ammunition are still pretty easy to come by, which is a great start to any libertarian fetish or ideology. Along the way, you can find ingredients that allow you to craft different kinds of ammunition, adding a bit more strategy to your attack plans compared to previous games in the series. This is no cakewalk though. This game is pretty hard. At the very least, it gives you a defensive maneuver to help limit the amount of damage you take. Think of it like a farm subsidy, if the crops were how much damage you could take and the subsidy limited how much you can grow. Unlike the previous games, there's not a lot of human enemies here. You mostly are pitted against mold monsters of various shapes and size. While this might seem a bit limiting, it's actually an effective use of the business strategy of core competency. Focus on the key things that you do well and stick to them. The original McDonald's only served burgers, fries, and shakes. This game only really has big molded, smaller molded, and some fat ones later on that have more pork in them than a state infrastructure spending bill. Really, the big draw is the Baker family and their personality. They're the grounding force that make you want to see what happens next and find new ways to hunt you and terrorize you. Now, before we go any further, here's something that the kids would call a spoiler alert, in case you don't want elements of this game ruined. Eventually, the events of the title take you out of the house and into a wrecked boat and later a mine. This is where Resident Evil 7 starts to fall apart. The tension isn't really there anymore, the Baker family isn't really a threat, and it eventually culminates in a final boss fight that feels so easy it might as well be scripted. If you were hoping for an epic showdown at the end, you're not going to get it. Instead, you find out that the developers here tried to slander big business. Not only do you find out that they're trying to demonize companies for creating new bioorganic weapons, but they've also ruined the image of Umbrella. Now they're all woke and trying to right the wrongs of the past by defeating dangerous creatures instead of creating them for profit. Now, as many of you know, I'm not just a libertarian. I'm also a consumer advocate dating back to my days on the hit show 2020. So I also have to look at this game from the perspective of whether or not it's worth your money. At least on that front, I'm happy to say that it is. Resident Evil 7 Biohazard is one of the scariest games I've ever played. Even though the game gives you resources to help push your way through, I'm still constantly worried about whether or not I have enough supplies to survive and what might be waiting around the next corner from me. There are times where I had to stop playing just to let my anxiety cool down, but also times where I didn't want to stop because I just had to see what happened next. It's not a very long game. Most Resident Evils actually aren't. But that's just fine, because you can sense the game starting to drag in its later sections. The first 75% of this title is really strong, with it only falling off in the back end, but not enough to diminish its overall quality. Also, if you get the Gold Edition, there's plenty of DLC to keep you occupied after the main story is done. So yeah, when it comes to whether or not this is worth your dollar, it definitely is. Despite this, it's hard to call this game libertarian with its plot. That being said, the development of the game certainly was. Capcom looked at how the market was trending and decided to change suit to do what was best for the franchise, and it turned out wonderfully. Pivoting from genre to genre can be a risky move, especially if it's not done right. In this case, however, it was done masterfully. Too bad they had to destroy the image and power of Umbrella to do it with their letting socialist messaging into the development room. But hey, what do I know? I'm not a major video game developer trying to revitalize a major franchise. Give me a break.